Hi everybody, I'm Izzy, and today I'm going to introduce you to the XT4. It's an L-Fence that works on your bow extender fence. We're going to go over the stuff that's in the box, how to put it together, and we're going to show you some cool things you can do with it. In the box, you'll have your acrylic guide plate, you'll have 4 small machine screws, you'll have 1 large machine screw, 2 T-bolts, 3 bow knobs, a follower, and your precision L brackets. On the bottom of the L bracket, you're going to see some inserts, and that's where those machine bolts are threaded in through this side where you see the taper. So I'll put that down like this, and I'll add my small machine bolts. The follower is meant to be stored on the device, so you can just use those 2 pins, align it with the holes like that, and I'm going to take my large machine screw and bring it up from the bottom and then add one of the bow knobs to hold it there. Now the last thing I need to do is put on the T-bolts from the back here. Now the slot lets you guide things up and down so you can adjust this height, and then we can add this to the fence system. Now when you're looking at the plate, you'll see this little cutaway or divot. Now that is for use on the bandsaw. Now if you're just going to use this on the table saw, you should install the plate with the smooth surface, the unbroken surface facing that way. But because we're going to use this a lot on our bandsaw, I installed it with that facing forward. But first, let's jump on the table saw, see some cool things this can do there, and then we'll jump over to the bandsaw. Installing the L-Fence on the extender fence couldn't be easier. Just slide the T-bolts in the T-track. The first thing you want to do is set up for your height. So in this case, I want to add about 1/16 of an inch above the height of material, and I'm just using a pocket ruler to do that. That ensures that the material is going to slide nice and smoothly through the surface. Now the next thing I want to do is raise my blade up so it just breaks the surface of the material I'm going to be cutting, but not high enough to hit the fence. Now in this case, because I'm using the L-Fence to duplicate a part, I want to make sure that the outside of the saw blade is perfectly flush with the outside of the L-Fence. And then I'm going to take the part that I want to duplicate and tape it onto the piece that I'll be cutting. One of the unique things about using the L-Fence is it makes the table saw feel a lot safer. You've got the blade captured under the L-Fence and it's behind the material that you're cutting, but it's important to keep in mind to always use proper table saw safety when using any tool on the fence. Now the material that you're cutting rides under the fence, so after the cut you'll want to stop the saw and make sure you're clearing any large debris. Smaller debris, it doesn't matter quite as much, but you always want to be careful. Now the part that we're duplicating, that rides against the fence. The material that we're cutting rides under the fence and is being cut by the blade that is flushed up to the saw blade. Now when you're cutting small angled pieces, it's always best to use your miter gauge, and that helps you control the angle. And just like that, in moments, I have a perfectly duplicated part. Now some other unique things that this does is acts like a stop when you're doing repetitive cross-cut pieces on your table saw. You can just position it in front of the blade and move it to where you want it and duplicate as many pieces as you want, and that safely leaves the material away from the fence so you don't have to worry about jam-ups or kickback. Now, when you're cutting short pieces, this adds a unique feature. It's similar to you would see on a Felder sliding saw where the fence stops right at the end of the blade. And this comes in really handy with short and some other applications as well, where you can just cut that short piece and then move on to the next one. Now, setting up the L-Fence on the bandsaw is fairly similar to setting it up on the table saw. The one difference is you need to put that bandsaw blade in that little divot we talked about earlier. Now to make sure that when you're adjusting the height that it returns to where the divot is, I use a little clamp on the fence. So when I am setting my height, I can just push that up against the clamp and that locks it in. So I know when I move it back to the blade, it's going to be in a proper position. Now I want to set up the distance from the blade to the fence. And again, depending on what you're doing and what you want, you can do that from different distances. In my case, I've got about a 64th of material being left, and I can just take this over to my router table and clean that up really quick. Now you see I'm using a template in this case, and again, this could be done with a part to duplicate a part. And the reason I might want to do this instead of using the table saw is if I'm cutting a material that burns a lot, or I have a little bit of concern about getting some tear out. Those are the kind of things that I would be thinking about where this application comes into play. I can do the rough out on the bandsaw and then take it over to the router table, and just leaving a 64th or a 32nd of an inch ensures that I won't get tear out when I run it through my router table. So this is a really handy application for this case or use case. The follower that comes on this stores on the device, but when you want to use it, you install it underneath the L-Fence. So one side accommodates a 1/4 inch blade, the other side accommodates a 3/8 inch blade. This time we're going to use the 1/4 inch. So I'm going to put the follower under that. One of the pins is going to go in the pin position in the back. I'm going to put the long machine screw back in and then tighten it down. Now I'm going to set it up just like I did on the bandsaw last time, but in this case I'm setting it up with the follower in mind. The real advantage here is that it keeps you from cutting into the line. So if I was just to mark out the lines on a template and then try to cut them, especially when you're cutting heavy grained materials, you don't have to worry about the blade jumping into the line. This really protects from that. And then again, just take this over to the router table and you have a really nice clean part.